Hi, my name's Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today for Service Catalog or Request Catalog, Business and IT Service Catalogs, how Service, Request, Business, and IT Service Catalogs fit together. A few quick notes. I am recording this event today, so you will receive a copy from me by tomorrow afternoon, and a copy of the recording and a copy of the slides will be sent to you. As far as questions today, your lines are muted, so I do ask that you use the Q&A panel. You can access this from the top right-hand corner. You'll see a blue box with a question mark up in the WebEx toolbar. Please send your questions to all panelists. This makes it easier for me to locate the questions and assign them. Lastly, just above and to the right of the slide you see now, above where it says Evergreen, you'll see double arrows and a plus and minus sign. Those double arrows will bring you to full screen mode. You will find this helpful, especially when Jeff Benedict does his demo later on in the webinar. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen Systems. Don?
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen, and with me is my normal partner in crime, Jeff Benedict, who heads up our ITSM practice and leads our innovation efforts as well. If you're new to our webinar series, welcome. If you're a past attendee, thanks for joining us again. Our goal is to share valuable information and insights you can use in your planning and activities right now. The topic we will explore today is a double header, the ever-popular service versus request and business and/or IT service catalogs. Here's our agenda. After a very little bit about Evergreen, we'll dive into the topic. And beyond that, we'll briefly demonstrate some of the concepts we're going to discuss today in our always evolving view of a very advanced self-service catalog and portal experience, which is built on top of ServiceNow. Then we'll answer some questions if you have any. Evergreen is a US-based consulting firm, and we work with hundreds of mid-market, Fortune 1000, and public sector organizations to improve their IT service management. We're a full lifecycle firm, or in other words, we have both process and technology in the same company. We're one of the top 5 US ServiceNow partners, and have a lot of experience across their portfolio of offerings, but we view all of it from a perspective of what we call customer-centric IT service management. At Evergreen, we think that traditional ITSM thinking is wrong because it puts the customer, the people we're really doing this for, in last place. Hard to believe, but true. In most cases, it takes a couple of years to even think about the customer. How could this possibly happen? First, we have walls around our thinking that we don't see. This is always how it's been done, so we don't challenge it. Second, we don't know how to put the customer first. What does the customer want? What are the best practices? How do we build it? So we put it in phase 3, which is that magical phase that never really actually happens a lot of times. Third, we do know traditional incident change, problem, etc., kind of best practices really, really well, so we do what we're comfortable with. But unfortunately, that's wrong. We need to start with the customer first. The customer should get a big win in phase 1, and the technology and best practices today can support it. Best of all, if we start with the customer, it changes what we do. Here's a couple quick examples. An incident, rather than think about how to handle incidents, perhaps we'll focus on how we can automate or eliminate the top 5 to 10 common incidents and requests. In change management, rather than always thinking about managing change, instead, perhaps we'll think more about how to eliminate or streamline changes to minimize the impact and speed to react to customers' needs. And last but not least, knowledge management can become something more interesting, like search and learn, which could be a place for powerful social self-enablement, rather than just kind of a tired afterthought, as it often is today. So if you start with the customer, it actually changes what you do. Let's get rolling. As we often do, covering a few idle definitions is useful for getting us on the same page. 3 are relevant today: service, IT service, and service request. Excuse me. Service is really simple. It's something you will pay for that someone does for you. Whether payment is time or money doesn't matter, the customer still has to make an investment decision about the service. Hiring someone to cut your lawn is a service, and you aren't expected to be out there with them pushing a mower. An IT service is still a service, generally combining people, process, and technology. And remembering, if you see this underlined section of text, remember that going forward about it being defined in a service level agreement. A service request can be any request from a user. Many of those go to the service desk. Often they're around add, change, or remove access to a service. Remember, requests do not require a request for change. As IT moves from technical activities to delivering complete services, what IT does needs to elevate from silo-based kind of things to end-to-end service execution. One key to accomplishing this is creating a robust service catalog. A tactical solution like a request portal doesn't really meet this need. The catalog, or the service catalog, is a strategic vehicle designed to meet the customer's needs and support the business strategy by delivering complete services that both need and want. The request portal is a singular, simplified, tactical, transactional kind of tool, mainly reacting to specific requests. The service catalog is only part of a larger customer-centric IT service delivery motion. Catalog is specifically only those services that are actively for sale or actively being offered at any given time. The service portfolio is the process that holds and manages services over their useful lives, from idea to build to deploy to run to change to retire. Creating services is a premeditated activity, aligned with the business goals and customer needs. In contrast, requests tend to be simple, transactional, and reactive. The service catalog will present services composed of a variety of components or sub-services that are defined in the service portfolio. Sub-services are typically the responsibility of distinct departments or technical silos and operationally delivered to the customer by groups from start to finish, and it's based on OLAs, operational level agreements, which then roll up into a broader SLA about that bigger service. Requests are typically delivered by a single department or an individual working from a queue or perhaps a list of requests. Any service listed in the service catalog includes a variety of details and in-depth information about the service. These include service options, hours, availability, and response times. On the other hand, requests are specific actions for things employees need. These are basic everyday activities like asking a question, access to an environment, or being able to use a printer on another floor. Cost transparency is critical from a service standpoint when IT needs to show value for the services it defines and presents to its customers. The service catalog supports the ability to define a price, chargebacks, or showbacks for a given service. Costs are not often associated with requests, which is usually executed regardless of cost. So this brings us to some evergreen advice. First, and really importantly, how can we tell what is a service versus what is a request? From our experience, there's one simple rule that works very well. Services are durable, requests are transactional. A service is durable over time. It keeps being provided. For example, if we offer Oracle Database as a service, we continue to provide Oracle service over time. We have established hours of operation, published service availability metrics, and specific commitments regarding solving problems or restoring service in the event of an outage. Requests are transactional. Once filled, they're completed. They are not durable. Performance metrics for requests are much more simple, really. They're usually based on delivery time commitments for fulfilling the request. Asking for access to the Oracle Database service is a request. This brings us to our second point. All requests are tied to services. If you call the service desk with a question or problem you're having, you're making a request against the service called Service Desk. If you order some desktop software or an iPad, both of those are requests which you are making against a service we might call Hardware and Software Store. The fact that requests are tied to services actually makes it easier to identify which is the service and which is the request. Our third point, services are defined and managed as configuration items in the CMDB and are under change control. Any service you provide could also be a sub-service to another service. As an example, we probably want to use a consistent financial approval process in our services. It's good for us, and it's good for our customers. And we might have 300 services that consume that financial approval process as a subservice. Now let's say there's regulatory change, and that change means we have to change our financial approval service. Under change control, we can easily identify the consumers of our service and perform appropriate impact analysis to ensure the change doesn't disrupt their services. Let's put a picture under this. We call this a service tombstone. Just like a real tombstone, it provides a concise description of what lies below. Here's an example of a service in our service catalog that we call SAP Business Objects. Next, we see who owns it, a brief description, who can access the service, and what are the requirements. Then you see here there are 3 attached requests, such as add the service or change my role. Perhaps I got promoted. At the very bottom, you see additional service details: in scope, out of scope, status, and feedback. If I'm still undecided as to whether or not I need this service, unlike a real tombstone, I can look at what lies below. Here we see much more detail of what is and what is not included in the service. This is where you can actually provide a broader view of the full functionality without cluttering up the tombstone, creating a better customer experience overall. Our design goal is to enable the customer through self-service to make a correct decision as to whether or not they should make a request to subscribe to the service. It's not always possible to make everything self-service, but it is the right aspirational goal to have. Okay, so I decide I want to subscribe. I click on the request item you see here. It's on the service tombstone. This pops up. And now if I want to pay $30 a month, I can put it in my shopping cart and I can buy it. So this is obviously a request attached to a service. Our last slide in this section shows the power of combining service and request. Together they give us compliance and customer agility. Here's how. Services that are durable have to be reliable, since many other services may be relying on them. This is why they're managed under change control, which makes changes to them more infrequent and more work. So they tend to be relatively inflexible, as they're really enterprise critical. On the other hand, requests are the way customers mostly start or change their interaction with services, from the perspective of adding, changing, or removing a service. Since requests are transactional only, they aren't under change control. This gives the service manager freedom to add new requests, bundle different request options, and so on, the freedom to quickly move to meet changing customer demand. So now we get to the second part of our double header, separate business and IT service catalogs. Again, let's do some idle grounding around services. It seems that I look into this and I did look into this quite a bit. There are 2 main kinds: IT services, which are what IT delivers to non-IT employees, and business services. And it sounds pretty simple, but then it gets a little harder. Business services has 2 definitions. They can be an IT service that directly supports a business process, or they can be a service delivered to outside customers by the business. I think that seems a little confusing. So that means providing an app like SAP to people in finance is a business service. And finance people using SAP to collect money from customers is the accounts receivable business service. To me, if we're just providing SAP as an app to an employee, that sounds kind of like an IT customer-facing service. To make it more interesting, maybe we think email is an IT service. But what if finance uses email along with SAP to collect accounts receivable from customers? In that case, is email a business service? So it's a little confusing. Now let's throw in 3 more: infrastructure services, core services, and supporting services. Idle definitions, which seem to have their own overlaps as well. I have to ask you this, and we've been working with this for some time. How could anyone keep all this straight? Or better yet, how could you explain it to someone else? I think it would be impossible. Last week, one VP I met with said he had spent the past 18 months just trying to get his people to understand the difference between service and request, and he wasn't done yet. The core truth is this, and this is a big, big point. Wherever we are in the organization, in IT or not, everyone has customers and everyone has services. The outcomes you deliver over and over are services. And some of you may have seen a slide like this before. The people asking for them are your customers. As you go down the services rather than silos path, it can get confusing, but two simple questions can help you stay on course. One, who is the customer? Two, what is the service? And they can spin off corollary questions that actually help you, like, would the customer care about this? And is this service exactly what they want? How might I improve it? Customers beget other customers. Consider the notion here of a mobile app for an end user or an end customer. In this example, the network technician is providing connectivity as a service, and his customer is the developer who's creating the application. The developer creates the application as a service for her customer, who's a line of business, and the line of business employees provide the application as part of their overall service delivery to their customer. Here's another example where services are combined to deliver a complex service. Here we see an administrator performing the service of installing a server in support of a CRM application for his customer, the CRM application owner. The CRM app owner, in turn, provides the system as a service to one of their customers, the training department. They use the system in combination with an instructor to deliver the service sales training to their customer, the sales team. Then Dwight Schrute, a salesperson, combines all these elements to provide the service a sales call to his customer. In any given silo of IT, you may have a variety of services and a variety of customers you provide them for. They can be inside IT, outside of IT, or even the end customer. Also, every one of your services might be a sub-service in multiple other service offerings. So you can see these lines, they go a lot of different directions, and I could have drawn a lot more on there because in reality, that's what it really looks like. It can make your head spin. To keep it simple, a service is a service is a great phrase, and as we said before, everyone has customers, everyone has services. It allows us to keep it all on a consistent playing field across IT. In reality, there's no idle definition for the business service catalog or the technical service catalog. It's just service catalog. And IDLE envision an IT service catalog. Right? So it's simple and logical to separate internal IT services from customer IT services, and we do the same. But that is not what the world sees now. The world is beginning to see everything as a service, and from the eyes of the customer for that given service, not just IT services in the service catalog. The delivery of nearly all those services today is technology enabled. So are they not, in some fashion, IT services? Some component of them certainly is. So services can be combined and recombined in hundreds of thousands of ways, with OLAs and SLAs combining and recombining at the same rate. This is the essence of what we see as a federated service catalog. So what is the reason underlying this line of thinking? We think it was primarily to make the services understandable to the two types of customers, i.e., those who speak IT and those who don't, and to try to make it easier for the service providers to present their services to the right customer. As we have seen, unfortunately, it isn't as simple as this in a truly federated service world. If having separate catalogs, and even more confusing, separate service types, isn't the answer, then how do we tackle this problem? We do it with a service taxonomy. A service taxonomy is a framework for organizing and managing our services. At the highest level, the framework should capture the broadest view of what you see as potentially within the scope of the effort. Of course, the taxonomy can be grown or shrunk later. It's never locked down. But it's easier to start with a broad view as there's no downside to it. You don't have to use all of it right away anyhow, and you'll minimize any reclassification efforts downstream that could come from changing the taxonomy. So the parts of the taxonomy are meant to be parts of a whole. And here's a simple example of a broad framework that covers line of business services, shared services, and two different types of IT service categories. As mentioned, we break IT into two groups, customer-facing and internal IT. You don't have to follow this convention, but these are often mixed together, which confuse everyone. Here you also see one of our service taxonomy principles, that the labels are for the customer and the framework is for the providers. A service can be presented to a customer many different ways. It may be in a what's new flashing icon, or a list of people who like this also like this. It isn't just found by drilling down the taxonomy. It might be found by a keyword search. But any section of a taxonomy is targeted at a particular customer set. And since we want to think like the customer, then the labels in that section should be in the customer's language, not the provider's. Beyond that, the labels will also surely be visible a number of different places throughout the customer's experience, so they have to make sense when they land on them. What do we mean when we say the framework is for the providers? It's the way the providers can understand the breadth and depth of services and combinations of services offered. If you had 300 services, could you really understand a numbered or alphabetical list of them? It would be too hard. What about combinations to yield a complex service? That would be impossible. So the framework is for the providers to help understand the services and the combinations that are offered logically, to avoid creating redundant services, to better combine existing services, and to ensure that services are aligned with the right customer. So let's wrap up this section with some evergreen advice. We start with taking the most simple approach to language. Use services and customers. That's enough. We have found it works well and everyone understands it because everyone has customers and everyone has services. Build one federated service catalog, but make sure any given view of it makes sense to the customer who will use it. A service taxonomy, where the labels are for the customers and the framework is for the providers, will help you and your customers understand your services and make a single service catalog work. That's all for our presentation today. Now I'll turn it over to Jeff, who will demonstrate some of these concepts in our advanced platform built on ServiceNow.
Great, thanks. As I turn control over to Jeff, I just want to remind everyone, you will find it helpful for this part of the presentation if you use the double arrows, which are just above and to the right of, the top right-hand corner of Jeff's slide right now. Those will bring you to full screen mode, and you will find those helpful. So, Jeff, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Don. So we're in our kind of metro-style self-service portal, and this is built on the content management system of ServiceNow. And so within this portal, users can consume information about our services. They can submit service requests. They can also then, of course, track the status of those requests. So I'm going to begin with where a user goes to kind of submit a new request. So I'll go into the request section of our portal. And so the first thing is I'm presented a list of categories or classifications to select from. And some of these may have subcategories. So I might want to select in hardware, laptops, or tablets. And I can also kind of filter through and look through different items that are in my different categories. Or I can also just apply a particular filter. So maybe I'm looking for getting access to specific software. So I put an access as a filter here, and it kind of reduces my list. And then I can also do some contextual, based off my results, I can filter this maybe in the collaboration category. So in this case, maybe what I'm looking for is requesting access to Yammer, but I might want to peruse some of the other things that I can request. And the other thing you'll notice on this page is my actual panel over here will adjust based off of the things that I'm looking for. So if I'm looking for access, or if I'm looking for hardware, I might have different experts or different kind of channels of support that I can provide to the consumer to help them with that shopping experience. Also, I can include other classifications or categories in my results to kind of widen my result set. So let's look at requesting access to Yammer. So I can present various questions. So I might have some choices or offerings to opt into as part of my access, so I can choose kind of the gold or silver plan, and we'll look more detail on what these plans are when we look at the service kind of tombstone, as Don used the term, in a little bit. But I can, obviously I can shop, I can order now, or I can add this to my cart. So I'll add it to my cart, and maybe I want to buy something else as well. So I'll go back into, say, my employee events. maybe I want to add employee name change to my list. This is a case too where, obviously some of our items we're providing out here can be IT specific kind of items, but this can also be something that's a requestable thing that HR and IT might provide services for. In the case of this one, HR will likely have to update your employee profile information, but IT may also have to update various systems that rely on your particular name change. So I've got a couple items in my cart now. And let me also show you one other route. So I kind of added items to my cart through a couple means. I went navigating through categories. I used a filter to kind of search for the items I'm looking for. Another route that I can go is there are some suggestions for me. So there are some popular request topics based off of things or services that I am a subscriber. So I utilize email. I'm also a user of Salesforce.com. So some of the popular topics are kind of showing up for me in this area. So like email-related requests, it's going to kind of show me a topic-specific sublist of things that I may request in context to this topic. So I can look and request things like forwarding email, asking for more storage space, or maybe setting up a new email account. And this one kind of guides me through the process, so I can kind of choose my program. I might not know what protocol is, so I can pull this up and look at more details of what protocol means. Maybe POP is appropriate for me. Same for kind of authentication. I'll choose Kerberos. And then it kind of gives me two choices here. I can either provide it with some setup instructions for me to follow and set up, or I can actually submit a request and get kind of assistance from an expert in helping me set this process up. So I'll look at my instructions, and these are based off my selection. So I chose Windows. So it's taking me to the specific knowledge topic and setup instructions for configuring this for my particular piece of software and machine. And that might be sufficient for me, so I'm going to close that out and maybe not add anything to my cart. So as we've kind of talked about, the request portal is more transactional in nature, whereas the service catalog is strategically aligned to the business needs and may combine multiple request items into a single service offering. So within this portal, the consumer can browse the published list of services from our taxonomy kind of perspective here. And notice how I also have in this view, I do have different catalogs. So I can break out my services into those that are functionally tied to HR versus facilities or procurement and or IT. So I'm going to choose information systems or services. These are my various items in here, and I can drill in further to look at, say, what are the specific services in this particular taxonomy tree or branch. And I'll look at, this is one that Don showed, kind of looking at SAP business objects. And, at the top I see some important information. I see who owns this service. I see also it's highlighting that I am a specific subscriber of this service. I also see ratings. Information about who it's offered to, business requirements, also notably what's considered in scope, what's considered out of scope. On the status tab, I can see any health, any alerts or outages or notable information about the service can be posted in the status tab as well. And notice I can also solicit and provide feedback on this service and see other people's reviews and feedback as they've entered them through their experiences. The next area I wanted to highlight on here is kind of tying the service to the requests and the requestable portal activities. So here's a case where we are taking the service and there's some actions or requestable items that can be submitted in context of the service. One is getting access to us as a new subscriber, one also requesting a role change, and also getting the necessary software that I may need in order to actually utilize this service to its fullest. One other concept I want to kind of highlight here is that these services can have different offerings and different kind of commitments. So I can take a service like in this case, laptop support. So how, the support we're providing for the laptops we give out to our employees. And we have kind of a default laptop support commitments, which entails providing virus protection and service pack upgrades. But we also have a special kind of support offering for executives That entails some commitments around how quickly we're going to resolve any priority 1 incidents and priority 2 incidents, as well as making sure multi-software application conflicts are resolved for our executives. Just to kind of complete this picture a little bit, we did look at requesting access to Yammer earlier, and here's kind of where we have our information about what you get for a gold package versus a silver package, which primarily entails a deeper commitment about its availability and a quicker resolution time in terms of priority 1 resolutions. So obviously behind the scenes of these commitments are those service owners that are there with the mission of delivering to those commitments. And in this portal, we also have a perspective for these service owners to manage their commitments and manage their service health and service quality. So I can come into here and look at services I own. Got some options to edit the service. I can also edit kind of some of the topics that would be suggested to users looking for help in regards to our service. But I can also go to our management dashboard, which is going to show me kind of a combination of various information that's pertinent to me managing this overall service. So I can see kind of active incidents, active requests, my total number of active subscribers. And then on the right is probably the most meaningful part for me, which is these are my commitments that I've made and how I'm actually performing in the last 7 days, the last 30 days, and the last year, and whether or not I'm 100% in conformity or whether or not there's some things that I'm in a breach state. And in this case, I've got I've got commitments related to my resolution targets. I've got commitments related to how quickly I provide access in terms of 1 business day, as well as the overall availability of my service. Other things I can see on this page, I can plot various charts and graphs that are pertinent to transactions and activities that are going on in regards to this particular service, as well as kind of see the feedback and the ratings and anything, and calling out anything that's considered negative that I might want to resolve from a quality perspective. Another component here, and this is where the seem-to-be of ServiceNow comes into play, of relating this service to other services or other dependent components. So I can see from an overall health perspective how my service is doing, as well as those dependent pieces and parts that my service depends on. So I can see it from this view. I can also see it from a business map view. And on the business service map view, I can also see various transactions as I hover over different components. So I can see activities as it pertains to the dependencies or the components of my service. All right, so one thing that is probably fairly apparent here is that there can be a lot of information for a consumer to sift through in the portal, whether that be navigating the catalog for different services and service offerings, or requesting different goods and services. So one solution that we typically use and utilize in ServiceNow is to assign user profiles, user personas to the consumers. And from a ServiceNow perspective, this typically translates to roles or user criteria, but that would equate to the users being assigned to different catalogs and or interaction to different knowledge articles and catalog content. So in essence, the result of that is that they'd only see content that's relevant to them. Another feature that can aid in terms of sifting through the large quantity of things to shop for or consume is kind of the search aspects. So let me show you just a couple subtle features related to the search here. So I can do something like, I want an iPad, and what the search is going to do is it's going to decode this into meaningful kind of chunks. So it's going to decode it into topics, keywords, and classifications. So it's basically boiled down my relatively simple search string into the category of tablets and a keyword of iPad. So it's jumped me into a list of iPads that's in our tablets category that I can shop for. All right, so I can then go and order and buy this particular tablet. Another example with our search is I can do, say, error when printing, say, email and Outlook as an example. And this one's going to tag it a little deeper, but you'll see, so it did a couple things. It took the word error and it classified that as I'm looking for help. It took the fact that I was doing a search for something pertaining to email and printing, and it coded this as related to our service of email, as well as a category of office and print, since we're doing a printing activity, and threw a couple of keywords in there to find the searches. And so based off of my results, it's kind of steering me towards, is this one of the topics that best meets your search string? So I can say, no, maybe this is just general how-to and troubleshooting, which then takes me to a list of knowledge articles that may help me solve my particular problem. Right, and then maybe this knowledge article here is indeed helpful to me, helps solve my problem. I can come up here and say, yes, this was helpful for me, and provide feedback back to our provider here that that's a helpful article and helpful to others as well, to see that that's an article that may be helpful to them in solving these particular problems. All right, so if you recall, I added a couple items to my cart earlier. To kind of go and actually check those out, I would go to my cart up here in my header, or I can go to it from my kind of off-canvas menu. In this case, I'm not going to check them out. I'm just going to remove them from my cart, but this is where I would go to check them out and order them. The other way I can order something, as you kind of saw earlier, was from my actual service catalog or defined list of services. I can go to, say, I'll go service text, and I'll go to HR. I can go to something like employee onboarding, for example. And I can look at the details of my onboarding kind of service, but I can also then initiate a new employee onboarding request. And I kind of want to submit this just to show you a bit of the fulfillment side of a request that is that kind of covers multiple different kind of I guess service offerings. And onboarding is a useful example in that you know, it aggregates the kind of capabilities of IT, such as network storage and access, but also brings in the functional departments of HR, facilities, into the service as well. All right, so let me fill this out. I'll go say this person's starting tomorrow. I'll just say rlodge@evgs.net. Some options of whether it's a temporary employee and whether it's permanent. And I'll note here, position is notable on this particular record because oftentimes what we do is we'll leverage the position to drive the standards by which this person gets configured. So the standard equipment, maybe the standard access, and the standard provisioning activities may come from their position of definition. The other notable is the location in terms of office-based versus remote. You'll see in the workflow in a moment here. There is some conditions tied to whether this is a kind of remote employee or somebody that's working in an office. So I can submit this request. And as a consumer, I'm taken to our status page where I can ultimately track the progress of this request and how it's progressing through its various life cycles. So let me quickly shift gears and we'll go to looking at this request from a fulfiller consumer perspective or a fulfiller's perspective. So here's our onboarding case. And so a lot of the details that we put in, we've already started to create a new user profile for Roger Lodge. A lot of the information that we had in those forms gets captured in different tabs of here to kind of work the overall request. And the way this works, and this is a case of the workflow is kind of cross-functional, that first goes to a group to approve. So I'm going to approve this. I'll just say it's approved and we'll move on to the next step here. And then after that, it goes to HR for HR to do any of their onboarding activities. So this entails them onboarding them from a training perspective, getting payroll set up, performing any background checks, getting them hooked into benefits. So this is where HR as a service provider can work alongside with IT as a service provider through one kind of coordinated workflow. Right, so I can say, let's say all of these particular HR tasks are now complete. And then what happens on the back end of this is once the HR onboarding activities are complete, then we spawn off the IT fulfillment activities to get them equipment, get them access, set up their office, and get them a badge. Just to kind of, in the interest of time, and just show you the workflow that instead of going through all the steps. But this is basically the workflow that IT then fulfills after HR is complete, which includes some automation to add an account to Active Directory, some adjustments to Active Directory groups and roles, some activities to provision the equipment that they need. And here's where you see some conditionals of if they're an office employee, then we have some setup activities for their cube or desk, as well as getting them a badge to the office. So that concludes what I hope to show today. I do appreciate the time, and I hope this was helpful in seeing kind of how ServiceNow can support both kind of the day-to-day transactional request portal, as well as a more proactive, strategic, business-aligned kind of service catalog, where you can culminate multiple things of request into one service.
All right, thank you, Jeff. That was interesting. I like the way that the search is evolving. That's pretty cool. So if you found this at all interesting and you wonder what might be, a logical next step, here are a couple of options from us. If you're interested in the advanced self-service catalog and portal that Jeff was demonstrating from, it's available as a self-service demo. You can go out and get a login to it and play with it to your heart's content. It's fully functional, so you can, and it doesn't require instructions to learn how to use it. It's easy to understand and use on your own. If you're looking for a better way to organize and manage your services, categorize your services, then there's a short video on our website about the service taxonomy designer capability that we built in MindMap, which is or XMind actually, which is the mind mapping application on our website, so you can see sort of how that comes together. Or, perhaps if you're considering a broader service catalog initiative and you're wondering how to get started, we do have a one-day on-site private workshop, which is for up to 15 attendees, and it really is the beginning of any of these kinds of engagements. When we start with a customer in a strategic roadmap exercise or a phase one activity, it always starts with this one-day workshop, and it basically educates the team. It gets them working on key business concepts like the service catalog, the taxonomy, and service design process in a hands-on fashion, and it gets a common language in place. So it can literally save you months of education and getting everyone on the same page for $4,000, and that includes our travel. So we think that's a pretty good value as well. Anyhow, those are a couple of options you have if you need a little help in figuring out what you might want to do next. Beyond that, I think we're done, and we are open for questions and wrap up here.
We are. And Jeff, I'm going to start with you. I had a question that came in early in your demo, and the question was, how are you differentiating services from applications? For instance, you listed SAP Business Objects as a service, but in reality it is an application.
Ooh, let me take that one.
Uh-oh. Okay. Or maybe Don would like to answer it.
Okay. Whoever raised the question, you're right, actually. SAP Business Objects is an application. And a good general, I didn't actually go into this because I had a lot of stuff to cover, but a good general rule is that you don't want to name your services with a product name or an application name. And the only exception to that is a couple of things. In some cases, the actual software may be the service being delivered. If there's very little beyond that being presented, it could be the appropriate name for the service. The other side could be if the customers know that service by that name really, really well, and they don't know it any other way. You might choose to name it by the product name. Then, again, like I said, the downside to that is later on, what if that product goes out of service or gets obsoleted and you got to replace it with something else? That's going to cause some confusion from the customer base. So it's really a trade-off decision you have to make on a service-by-service basis.
Great. Jeff, anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say the same thing, and that obviously Don had indicated before the labels are for the consumers, and I think that's what we see a lot of times is that is a common nomenclature, though it's not exactly the ideal scenario, right? I think we want to try to instill service names that aren't product specific if we can.
Okay, great. And Jeff, I really think this next question's from you, and the question is, does ServiceNow interface with HTML sites?
Can you say it again?
Yes. Does ServiceNow interface with HTML sites?
Yes. So I mean, ServiceNow's portal that I just showed is all that was all kind of contained inside of ServiceNow's content management system, which is its own HTML kind of site. But there's certainly integration capabilities of ServiceNow to either reach into other systems and display information from other systems, or you can also embed other HTML site content into ServiceNow, or vice versa, embed ServiceNow content into another HTML site.
Okay, great, thanks. Don, I think this one's for you. The question is, it would seem that getting everyone in IT on the same page regarding a taxonomy could be a challenge. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it is, right? It is a challenge because you've got to get, ostensibly, you've got to get an IT-wide agreement on what a taxonomy and its labels and its organization is at a high level. Now, all that said, it can be done in a matter of a couple of weeks using breakout sessions and focus groups, basically, to drive through it, driving out the customers, the services, and the framework conversation, and then creating a normalized view of it. It's not as, maybe not as big an effort as you might think, or I might have thought, but it is a couple weeks, could be a couple weeks intense effort. What's interesting from that, though, is in many cases, two things happen. People become aware of who the customers are and what services actually are, as simple as that sounds, and begin to think in what services do we provide as opposed to what technology activities are we performing. That's a huge difference right there. The other thing that happens is, in many cases, it's the first time the organization has actually seen all that it does, all that IT does, how and organized effectively in a framework from a customer-centric view, and that can be quite a change right there.
Great, thanks, Don. Jeff, another one for you, and also I'll remind everyone, please send the questions to all panelists so that I can field them and review them. Jeff, we already have an intranet portal for users to search and view service information. How would a ServiceNow portal work with our current solution?
So we do see this as a common, I guess I won't say a challenge, but a common scenario. And there really are two kind of activities that we see a lot of people working to get kind of ServiceNow working with existing portals. And some of those maybe you might have a Jive, you might have a SharePoint, Drupal, or some other kind of CMS kind of solution out there. You know, one option is kind of exposing ServiceNow content, usually via web services, so that information, you know, maybe like the taxonomy of services, the service definition, or catalog items can be kind of displayed in the other portal. The other kind of strategy we see is styling ServiceNow's kind of portal solution so that it blends in with the existing site. And that results in transitions from, you know, one existing portal to ServiceNow being as transparent as possible to the user. So it's, you know, it's fairly common to expose things like the knowledge search, the service definition, and the request item data to another portal, and then utilize ServiceNow as the place to kind of submit those requests and kind of track the status of those requests.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Don, probably for you, it says, what are the outcomes of the private workshop, and does purchasing that go towards the price of the actual package or final product?
I love questions like that. So the one-day workshop has three primary outcomes, and there's others as well, but these are the three big ones that stand out. The first is it creates kind of a common understanding and education, so about service catalog, service portfolio, taxonomy, and all the terms, what are services, what are requests, how do these things fit together. So it's that common education and common definition and terminology everyone can use, and that's a couple of hours. And then after that, we then dive into a more interactive service taxonomy exercise where we take a sample taxonomy and then we work it as a group, right? And by being hands-on, the goal is not to create a taxonomy, but to play with it, to work with it, to understand how the parts fit together and how things can be presented. So it's an interactive learning exercise around a taxonomy. And then the last thing we do, and these again are the big parts, we go through an actual service design process with the service design package that we have built. So we will create a representative service with the group, and we'll get all the factors, the variables, the commitments, the availability, the owners, the subservices, all that stuff. We'll define all that at a high level so you can see how a service package actually comes together. And that, so that really, like I said, there's a few other things, but those are the heart of what it is, and everyone understands those concepts and has a little bit of hands-on time with it. And yes, I mean, is it a deductible from the next phase? Sure it is, because that's essentially the first day of everything we do when we go and meet with a client and start to work with them. So yeah, you would already paid for that part if you bought the one-day workshop.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Jeff, another question for you. Would the request for products such as an iPad punch out to a vendor self-service ordering portal? Sorry, I can't talk today. Sorry about that.
All right, I think I got that one. So, yeah, I mean, it can. However, I'll say the more common solution we see is that kind of your vendors' common products that, your company has been basically agreed to pay or agreed to buy or, made available to you to buy, is usually kind of either loaded into ServiceNow or kind of manually maintained. And then the integration with your vendors tends to be more downstream in the request workflow to actually place the order with the vendor, get tracking on the shipment and the receiving of the product into your, stock center or stock location or location. For example, if the workflow is determined that there's a product being requested through the portal that can't be sourced from like an existing stock room, then you can go through either generate a purchase order in ServiceNow, or you can integrate out to a financial system to generate that purchase order. From there, usually the integration process is to kind of place an order with the vendor, and once the product is actually delivered in your financial system, then it would trigger kind of that receiving and delivery of end user equipment to through a ServiceNow workflow. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, another one for you. We use Workday for onboarding our employees. How would this fit in the onboarding workflow you demonstrated today?
Good. Another, it's another common kind of solution, obviously trying to meld multiple tools together into one overall solution. First of all, there is a plugin that ServiceNow offers as part of their Fuji application, or Fuji version, to do kind of an integration between Workday and ServiceNow. So there is a kind of predefined integration out there, which is primarily focused on kind of keeping that employee profile data that you may maintain in Workday kind of in sync with ServiceNow. But I think in this scenario, we kind of started the process from the portal all the way through to the end. And what would happen, I think, in a Workday integrated scenario is that the employee would be set up, all the HR tasks would happen in Workday, and then once they're actually kind of their start date hits and their employee profile start date hits, that would then trigger the ServiceNow IT onboarding workflow, and that would then provision all those various steps that we saw kind of in my workflow flow before.
Okay, thank you. Couple more questions, Jeff, that look like they're for you. One question, is there a way that Remedy can work with ServiceNow? Our organization purchased Remedy and we have to use it.
Yeah, I mean, there are. So first of all, there are integrations between ServiceNow and Remedy that are in a plugin, and luckily, the modern technologies these days are all web service enabled, so being able to integrate them from a mechanism perspective is certainly possible. We have seen cases or customers that have looked to put ServiceNow in as the portal and the service catalog and the end user kind of presence, so that all of the the ordering, the tracking of status, the search of knowledge would all be done through ServiceNow. And then on the back end, the fulfillment engine being like a Remedy or an HP or some other solutions they may already have. So that's certainly possible. It does obviously add some complexity to the mix, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to that. From a user experience, the user could experience what we showed today. you know, from the look and feel, the use, the ability to self-service, all that stuff is possible. On the fulfillment side, it just becomes a matter of how long does it take to deliver whatever that requested activity is.
Jeff, I'm not sure if this is for you or Don, and I was actually just IMing with this person trying to get clarification. So I'll read the original question because I haven't heard back. It says, please explain the service design offering. Is it a tool for ongoing customer use or service-by-service subscription offering where a customer would come to you for each new service to be designed? And I wasn't sure if they were asking about the service taxonomy that we offer or our employee service self-service catalog. You want me to read that again? So it's, please explain the service design offering. Is it a tool for ongoing customer use or service-by-service subscription offering? Okay, so I think, well, it might be around the service design process and package, right? And that is a supporting process and a set of templates that allow you to define a service and making sure you cover everything that's included and all the afters and points, and you can put that into the service catalog effectively. The goal is to make sure you have consistent service construction, right, for compliance and quality and customer look and feel and experience. And that's part of a toolkit we bring with us, and our clients have it when we're done working with them, and they can continue to use it to build services. Okay, great. And I'm hoping, I'm just IMing back to see if that answered Jeanette's question. So one last call for questions. If yes, that did answer her question. Thank you very much. And I don't see any additional questions, so just a reminder, while I'm doing this last call, you all will receive an email from me no later than tomorrow with a link to download a recording of this webinar, as well as a copy of the slides. We do plan to have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, so please check back to the resources section of our website, evergreensys.com, and click on resources. For our future webinars, you will also find a copy of all our past webinar recordings and slides that you can download at any time. So I don't see any more questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you soon. Thank you.